What's going on, everybody? It's Bill Bailey with today's Boondoggle. And real quick housekeeping note, if you are watching us on YouTube, Rumble, or BitChute, please hit that follow and subscribe button. And if you are listening to us on Spotify, Apple, Google, all the podcast platforms, please hit that subscribe button and, help build up our numbers so we can bring you these amazing conversations like the one I know I'm about to have with my good friend, Mr. Mark O'Shea. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
I wanted to let the audience know I don't want them to confuse you with that famous herpetologist by the same name that's out there.
Cranky, mate. No, definitely not that guy.
It's funny because like I told you, I was like, well, yeah, it's like I know Mark, but I don't know, everything about Mark to get this, to go into this conversation. So let me look him up. And then I see the first guy that pops up is this. And for the audience that didn't know, because I didn't know, a herpetologist is someone who specializes in the study of reptiles and amphibians. So
kind of like a Steve Irwin guy. And I think he's from Australia, is he not?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So not that guy, but by happy accident or maybe predestination from our higher power or whatever, this happens to be episode 216, and here I am talking to a Cleveland music legend, Mr. Mark O'Shea.
Hey guys, 216. Works, man. Right on.
So Mark, usually when I have people on for the first time, I like to get a background.
Okay.
Of them. So do you remember originally what did you want to be when you grew up?
Wow. I'll be honest with you. I think I'm exactly where I need to be. I think I'm the luckiest guy in the world because if I go back in time and I think about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be, it was not the usuals. It was not a fireman. It was not a police officer, or a lawyer. From a very early age, I would probably say cognitively, from like age 6 forward, I love music. I listen to it all day at work. I listen to it in my car. I listen to it going to and from work in the car. At home, I have the wireless speakers all over the house in different zones. Still have over 300 records in the basement. I have a turntable and a stereo in the basement. I spin records. Yes, I spin records. And you should come over and play pool with me sometime. I suck.
Yeah,
I have a pool table and I suck.
Me too. So great. We can listen to your records while we're doing it.
Exactly. So ever since I've been a kid, I wanted to do. I felt this need to be in the music business, but as I tell my friends, I can't carry a tune in a bucket. In second grade Christmas, I asked for a guitar. My father bought me an acoustic guitar, and by the summer after my third grade year, it went the way of the Pete Townsend, and broke it. In a fit of no showmanship. So, having said that, in Cleveland, and I know you'll agree with me, we were blessed with great radio. Yeah. I mean, I moved here. My father, Don O'Shea, was a Marine. He died in December of 1968. He got the flu and came home one day and just said, Linda, my mom, I don't feel well. She said, Don, let's go to the hospital. And he was gone in 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, double pneumonia in the lungs. Anyway, so my mom met a guy named George Hahn, and he was my dad. I don't remember my father. I was way too young. But we moved to Cleveland, and we arrived in Cleveland what would have been the summer of 1970. And when we originally came to Cleveland, we lived in my grandmother's house. And one of the Christmas gifts that I got that year in December of 1970 was I asked for a radio, and I was given an an AM FM radio, and it had the monaural earplug in it. Just the one. It was like flesh colored.
Yeah.
You could only stick it in your ear. And every night I'd go to bed listening to music. I'd fall asleep with the earphone in my ear, listening to music. And my brother Michael was in the bed in the same room, across the bedroom, had his blanket over his head with his knees up, and he's got a book, and he's got a flashlight tucked in his shoulder, and he's reading a book. So he's an attorney. So he's a bookworm, and I'm in the music business. So that's where it started. And then eventually it got into, Dad bought me a cassette deck. Then FM radio in Cleveland exploded. We had WMMS was just playing all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah.
Do
you remember like what you were listening to back then too? That was like,
oh, absolutely. I still have my original copies of Led Zeppelin's first 3 records. I had a childhood friend named Frankie Gorman, and hey, Frankie, if you're ever tuning in or listening, we had lots of fun. Frankie Gorman and I would, his parents were pretty cool parents. They're very, very hip, 60s folks. His mom drove a Volkswagen, so Beetle. I remember driving around that thing. So they were pretty cool, hip folks. And we would go to his house and we would listen to records. And one of those first summers I moved here, I asked for a cassette deck, and I got a cassette deck. And my dad, when I would ask him to take, I would do chores around the house, I would save my money, he would take me to Melody Lane Records, which there's a record store. It's still there. I think it's on the corner of Cook, maybe. Cook in Detroit and Lakewood. The record store that was there would turn into Record Rendezvous.
Okay.
Or Record Revolution. Still a record store. But that was the indie record store when I was a kid. So we'd go up there, and he was a very patient guy. And later on find out in life that, he was a college DJ, and he liked all the R&B and the rockabilly stuff and things like that. But he would let me buy a record, or he'd let me buy a cassette deck. The only thing I didn't have when I was a kid, and when I was okay with it, was an 8-track player. I thought 8-track players were silly. Yeah. So I had a cassette player, and I had a radio. And then in the basement, we had, the 1950s mid-century modern console, and I remember, you could play records down there, and, when you were a kid, you'd stack all the 45s on the little loader, which was a cylinder, and it would keep dropping your 45s and play your music. And of course, as you got older and you started taking care of your records, it would turn into, you would drop the needle down very gently into the record.
Yeah.
And then, so I constantly was listening to music. I would read the covers of the records. I would look inside. Where was it recorded? Who was the producer? Who was in the band? Were there lyrics? Can I follow along? Sometimes I'd even look at the label and see, I said to my brother once, hey, do you know that there's that somebody wrote on the vinyl along the sleeve? I mean, around the label. Meanwhile, that was the etching that they put in the metal master. And when they would squeeze it, it would just get put onto the record. And I would just be looking at it, kind of going, ooh. And then I realized sometimes that the number on the record matched the number on the sleeve. Records had serial numbers. So I just always wanted to keep buying records and keep listening. And that bug never went away. And then when I was at Ignatius High School, I was there from 77 to 81. And if you remember what happened in 77, that's when alternative music or punk just went poof, went through the roof. And there were college radio stations in Cleveland that would play that stuff. And one particular day, I'm channel surfing and ended up at the far left-hand part of the dial, which was 88.7, 88.3, 88.9, no, 89.3, 88, yeah, all of the Cleveland State's radio, John Carroll's radio, and WCSB 91 point, WRUW. So and all the students were playing all kinds of weird stuff like glam, sleaze rock, punk, new wave, metal, stuff you weren't hearing on MMS. And
Yeah.
the first time I heard The Clash, I was like, what? And off the first record, 77, I was like, what the hell is this? And then the Ramones, are you kidding me? And all my buddies in high school, we're all into Southside and Bruce and Michael Stanley, and nothing wrong with those guys, but it was just all of a sudden there was this different sound and this different style, and that was the final bam. And it just made me just like dive in deep to music and just go, and in 81 I graduated from Ignatius. In 81 I went to college, and it was like I met people like me.
Yeah.
They weren't popular at school. They were loners. My best friends at Ignatius were my teachers. I don't talk to anybody from high school. I talked to some of my treasured classmates on the internet, like Milton Turner and Donald Bawes and Pat Shields. These are some of the guys I hung out with in high school, but it wasn't like we would go out on the weekends. We would hang out at school. But
yeah, so you went off to college, and you're a music fan, but you still kind of weren't like, you didn't really have.
I'm gonna get to that. So when I was at Miami, as I was saying to you earlier, I met people like me, and my brother Michael, ironically, who was a year ahead of me, I started to hang out with his friends. And his friends were musicians. And then I moved into a fraternity house after my freshman year. And within the fraternity house, there were 3 bands. And these are all top-notch guys, and they would play 3 or 4 nights a week. So, of course, I started roadieing for them. I'd go to the shows. I'd pack up the gear. I, again, couldn't play, but, they'd show me how to tune a guitar, change a string if something broke, drive at night from back from Dayton or Cincy back to Oxford. I went to Miami University, get up the next day and go to class, and then I started working at a bar. And then, there were bands playing there 2 or 3 weekends a week, a month. Then I started booking my own shows. Now, the kick in the pants was in Oxford in September of 1983, WOXY went on the air. And WOXY was an alternative format radio station, 24 hours a day. So they later went on to came down in history. I think the second major radio station, not college, but certifiable radio station that went with a 24 alternative format. The first one was K-Rock in Los Angeles. And there was this couple, they bought the station. They liked the music. They thought it was the future. WXY, the future of rock and roll. If you listen to Rain Man, the movie Rain Man?
Oh, yeah.
There's the scene in Rain Man where Dustin Hoffman goes, WOXY, the future of rock and roll. So they would play all kinds of great music. So I would ride my bike out there with my hardcore records or my punk records, and I'd hang out with the DJs late at night and we'd play records. I'd tape records while I was out there onto blank cassettes that I could barely afford. I had a Walkman that I had to work like overtime, like picking quarters up off the floor at the bar to save money to buy a Walkman, but that was it. I had my Swiss Army gas mask bag, and in there were my clove cigarettes, my extra batteries, my Camel lights, my Walkman, and 10 or 12 cassettes. So I was always this kid skateboarding around Oxford, listening to music, thinking about it all the time. So then I graduated from, so I'll also need to say, I started to work for the concert board, Bill. And the concert board was the volunteer students who had worked the concerts at college. And so because of the fact that one of the concert board president was this guy named Eric, whose older cousin actually ended up working for a booking agency, and I'll get to that story. Eric said, hey, Mark works with bands. He should be the guy that interfaces with the production manager from the band on behalf of the student staff. So I'm meeting production managers and talking to them. And he'd be like, all right, so how many students we have? I got 20. Oh, wow, great. Okay, can we get 8 of them to go over with Bill with lighting? Can we get, 8 of them to go over with Tom from sound? And can we get 4 of them to go over with the guys and doing backline, and then can we get the balance of the guys to go out to the truck and unload the semi? So here I am, having been this roadie, and I'm now interfacing with real bands, and I'm just like, wow, this is so cool. This is so cool. And I get a check for it. You get like a $40 check for it. I get to work all day, I get free meals, and I get to see the show. Shows I got to see. The Go-Go's with the Flock of Seagulls. I was a huge fan. It was cool. I got to see Echo and the Bunnymen with the Leather Nun. Yay. I got to see the Kinks. I got to see Foreigner. I got to see Talking Heads do that legendary tour, the legendary tour that they were on that turned into a concert film called Stop Making Sense, where David Byrne comes out first with the beatbox, the big, huge acoustic guitar and the oversized suit, and he does right into their biggest hit at the time called Psycho Killer. He goes right into it, and it's an acoustic version with a beatbox, a cassette tape, the do-do-da, do-do-do-da, do-do-da, and it was in a cassette box, and they put a microphone in the cassette box. Meanwhile, one by one, we're all dressed in black, and we're bringing out various members of the bands on rolling risers, and then we're bringing in the curtains. So we're building the set, the first 3 songs, and I'm just going, fuck, this is cool. This is so fucking cool. I got to be a part of this. No, graduation comes along. Dad says no, and I'm like still under the thumb. And so that was May of 85. So by June of 87, I sat my dad down at dinner because I was still living at home. And I go, Dad, he goes, yes. I go, I can't do this job anymore. And I was telemarketing. And he goes, yeah, why not? I go, because I'm going to go buy a gun and I'm going to put it in my mouth and I'm going to pull the trigger. I can't do this. I don't belong in this world, meaning this 9-to-5 world, this corporate world. I got to be doing something else. So he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to take some of my savings and I'm going to go back to school to do something within the music business. So he goes, okay, do your research. Let me know what you find out. So I come back and I find out that there's a lot of schools that have music programs, but you have to audition. You have to be able to play an instrument. I don't play an instrument. Then I find that there's this place in Southern Ohio called the Recording Workshop, which teaches you audio engineering. And I was like, cool. And that's like in this intensive 6-week program, 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. And you learn, and it's hands-on, and it's near my house. And so I drove my car I enrolled, I paid my fee. I went down there, I studied my ass off. I was top 3 out of like 85 people that took the course that term. Then I took two weeks of the electronic maintenance program afterwards to learn wiring and troubleshooting, but I was already a gadget guy. I was already taking radios apart as a little kid. So, I knew my way around the toolbox. My grandparents, Grandma and Grandpa O'Shea, asked me, what do you want for your first communion gift? I said, a toolbox. Oh, that's really nice. I go, no, a real toolbox, real tools, not toy tools, real tools. So I got a nice box of tools, some of which I still have. But anyway, so I graduate from there. I come home and I go to try and get jobs in recording studios, and everybody's like, yeah, nice kid, go get out of here. So then I started to go to shows because I was a fan of music, and I started talking to bands like, hey, do you need a road crew guy? And they were like, yeah, sure. Do you need a sound guy? What? You do sound too? Yeah, I do sound too. So I started roadieing and doing sound for bands. Then do you know Weasel Strychnine?
Yes.
Yeah. Then I met Weasel.
I believe he lives by me, I think, over here.
Yeah. He lives on West 70th. Then I met Weasel Strychnine, who, for lack of a better description, was a production manager or stage manager. He was a guy that would put together non-union crews for loading and unloading of trucks, setting up of PA and lights and sound and video and gear. And in addition to that, if we needed to do something logistically for any kind of music entity in town or any band coming in and out of town that needed assistance, I would work with them. We'd do it. So here I am again. I'm interfacing with bands. I'm interfacing with professionals that are on tour. Guys are really on tour, and I'm going, boy, that sure would be nice to be on tour one day. So that was the brass ring you were always trying to get. So I just kept my nose to the grindstone. I was just a hired hand for Weasel. But within 6 months, he goes, Jesus, you never stop moving. You're always, asking the tour guys, what's next? He goes, I'll tell you what I'm going to start to do. He goes, I'm going to start to go run crews in other cities or go do other things, and you're going to be the stage manager. So then I started being stage manager for him. I was in charge, but yet I was probably one of the newest employees. So that's how I started to also meet all of the musicians from the Cleveland music scene, because I was mixing shows. I was roadieing for bands. I was stage managing concerts where they would be opening for national acts when local bands could still open for national acts. So I'm interfacing with all these guys. And that's where I started to meet all these musicians who eventually I ended up working with one day. That's where I met Trent Reznor. That's where I met Richard Patrick. That's where I met Andy Kubaszewski. And these were that's why I got to know Sean Bevan, the guy I eventually ended up mixing sound for 9 Inch Nails I toured with. That's how I started to make these connections, and that's how I started to get into it. But it all started with this vision of wanting to be in the business, but it was just, what's next? What can I do? Who can I meet? So while I'm working for Weasel, I meet Michael Belkin from Belkin Productions. Michael Belkin goes, you should come work for us. And I'm like going, doing what? He goes, well, occasionally we need a production assistant for some of our stadium shows, or we need a guy, what we call as a runner, and you go out and you run errands for bands. So I'm like, I'm in. As long as Weasel's cool with it, we're nothing going on. So Michael Belkin or Stacey Harper from Belkin Productions would call me, and they'd give me a list of dates. I'd call up Weasel or speak with his person, doing his scheduling at the time, which was a girl named Michelle Pastura, which her name was Mitch Bitch. Michelle would do all the scheduling, or Weasel would do the scheduling. He'd be like, okay. And he would write it down. I wasn't available that day. So I started to work shows at the Coliseum. I started to work shows at the stadium, like The Who and U2 and Pink Floyd and the Stones, just a little blip on the radar, but eventually again, when I started working for Belkin, they started to give me more and more responsibility, and there was, and every time I could learn something from Michael or Jules, or Stacy being one of the key people. Stacy still is probably one of the most well-respected promoter reps and or production managers for a promoter in the entire world. So Stacy was a vast array of knowledge. Stacy would be like, hey, organize this, or hey, go and do that. And for these stadium shows, whether it was U2, the Rolling Stones, or Monsters of Rock, in Akron at the Rubber Bowl, I was usually the first guy there and the last guy to leave, because I'd be there as the machines arrived and the tent guys and anybody else that needed to be there first day, telling everybody where everything went, because I'd be told where everything went, because the promoter reps would come in later. And so I learned how to do all that. I learned how to just, be the go-to end all guy. And I learned how to be organized and be ready for any situation that came. Plus you're interfacing with production managers that are doing stadium shows. My God, the things you're going to learn working with these people. That's incredible.
Now, real quick, what did you originally, like when you went to college, before you went to that recording school, what did you originally graduate with, or what were you going
A Bachelor of Arts in Sociology. And I was 1 4-hour class away from a double major in sociology and political science. Excuse me.
And then was like, obviously your plan or your calling, you felt it was music, but what was like the original plan like for you?
Law school.
Like your brother? To
go to law school. But after I graduated from Miami, I came home. I spoke with a couple of judges and a couple of lawyers, and including a parole officer. And I was just like, not for me.
No.
Not for me.
Well, it's like like you said, you felt it in your soul, like you weren't where you were supposed to be, and you listened to where and it's funny because, like, how in another place that we're both familiar with, you go there and you always hear your story from somebody else, and like I'm kind of hearing very similar my story as you're telling yours, because I remember me growing up and getting the tape recorders, and I would like actually record myself, like doing shows like now, like I'm doing with this podcast now, and and love music and record off the radio and play music. And there was a point where I wanted to play an instrument and be a musician and stuff. I would play a mean tennis racket in my garage to records and stuff like that, but when it came to actually like being disciplined to learn how to play an instrument, I couldn't do it. And I remember I even took out a loan at a music store in Parma, and I got a Korg X3 because I wanted to be the next Trent Reznor out of Cleveland, and I figured, he does all that with the keyboard and everything. I could be like 9, and I had no discipline for that whatsoever. And then Mushroomhead ended up buying the Korg X3 from me down the line. But I started, like going to shows, doing merch. I tried the roadieing thing, but I was never, I didn't have the hard work and hustle back then either, but I wanted to enjoy the spoils. But there was so much with, how I networked and kind of got in and became friends and started promoting. I was like, okay, I can't play an instrument, but I can start booking some shows, and started doing that for a little bit. But it's funny, I was listening to the similarities in that. And, I don't know, and then, I was just basically like kind of hearing my story, but go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I think what you're hitting on is there's a dream, and then so you have there's this dream, and you have these expectations. A friend of mine many years ago gave me a very good verbal tool. In this other program that we're parts of, we learn these tools.
Yeah.
And that tool was, she said to me, Lori O'Brien said to me, she goes, Mark O'Shea, you have a lot of these expectations. And she goes, it's really great, and you're really motivated and you work really hard, but you got to have a way to monitor those expectations. And I was like, wow, that's so deep. And she's looking at me laughing. And I go, no, that is so deep. So I made a P-Touch label and I stuck it on the top of my laptop, and it was there. And it's not on my laptop anymore, but I used to keep, remake it and put it on all my laptops,
And manage your expectations. Is that what it's?
Yeah. It's a you have expectations. You have so it's like you yeah, you have expectations. Now you have to monitor them. So you have all these it was okay, the slogan was monitor your expectations.
Yeah. Well, I
And
remember I ended up going and working at, UPS for a while, doing that. I landed that job. I became like a driver, and it was just like, my family and everybody was just like, of that mindset where it's just like, you got a good job and that's what you have to do and you have to stay there. But every day I walked through that gate and buzzed in, I felt the same way, like getting a gun and blowing my brains out. This sucks. I felt like I was like not doing what I was supposed to be doing. And, it always kind of came back to doing something involved with music or networking and building relationships in this world. And so much has opened up since I've been in, now working it, with the program that we're both involved in too. But yeah, before we get like ahead to all that, so you go on, you're working with these bands and networking, you build this relationship through your hustle, gets noticed, and the Belkin, which infamous here in Cleveland and nationally.
Absolutely.
What they became Live Nation then, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. Jules and his brother Michael, God rest Michael's soul, they built from nothing one of the largest independent promoter companies, entities, whatever you want to call it, in the entire world, and right here in Cleveland. And eventually, Live Nation was scooping up a lot of these independent promoters, and they came to the Belkin brothers and they said, what appears to be, they gave an offer, and Jules and Michael said, sure. But I know that there's not a doubt in my mind, and I don't know for sure, and it's not my business, but it's just called my gut, is that they had some stipulations in selling their business. They probably, I guarantee you, they said, you've got to keep our staff, because a lot of the staff just immediately transitioned over. They probably said that, you got to, allow us to, in some points, probably do some shows still under the Belkin Productions name, but I would assume it probably faded out over time. But, Jules is still, well respected. He's still out there, and he's not doing shows anymore. He's totally retired, but his nephew Michael still works for Live Nation, and many of the original Live Nation staff are gone, except a few of the founding folks, which I think Barry Gable and Stacy are still there. But that would be pretty much it, as far as I know. But again, all legends, all great people, all solid forces in the entertainment business, still to this day. And
what a perfect, talking about like all the schooling that you had, but this was probably the best university for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was the learning and earning at the same time. And it was when I was given the chance to go out and work with bands as a tour manager or road manager, because of my experiences working with Weasel doing shows, and then working with the Belkin people, the Belkin company, is I was able to walk the walk and talk the talk, because I knew what the terms meant. I knew what was expected of you. I knew what you had to do or what not to do to be taken seriously. So, the particular band that I cut my teeth with from the Cleveland music scene, as we had this meteor level, just skyrocketing career in such a short time, we were successful as we grew, because I knew what you needed to do at this level. I knew what you needed to do at that level. And then when you get to the arena level, which we eventually did in 1994, in 95, there were people who ironically were there was a gentleman who was ironically from Cleveland, from the original New Agora, a gentleman named Stuart Ross, who took me under his wing and taught me tour accounting. And I get very verklempt every time I talk about that guy, because I truly love him as a person, as do many people in the entertainment business. Many people, Stuart is a guy, and I've actually tried to mimic the way I have stayed in the music business or come back into it. I've tried to mimic his actions, where I share as much of my knowledge as I can with others. And there are many of my other contemporaries, like David Norman is a famous tour manager, Doug Wilson, and Jim Runge, and Mark Clark, and some Mary Jo Kazaka. A lot of these people I've just mentioned are people that have this tour manager Zoom thing going on, or it was going on, and they would share their experiences, and they'd go through all of these topics, and they'd spent the whole pandemic doing it and beyond the pandemic doing it. And
Wow.
Their following was just massive. It was called Tour Management 101.
Wow.
So it was like a Zoom meeting. So they had me sit in on a couple of these things, and it gave me great pleasure to see that a lot of these people mentioned Stuart as a force. And Stuart was another guy from Cleveland, and he knows Jules and Michael Belkin and Michael Belkin.
And he was like a mentor to you then?
Absolutely. But
so was he somebody like that didn't have to take an interest and help you out?
Didn't have to. No.
Of his heart and
didn't have to. But
he teaches that, and then you've kind of taken that.
Right. And I pay it forward. So the whole idea of paying it forward. And, there's, for a while there were a lot of people in the business that would not pay it forward. And I think that doesn't help the business, because we all can't tour forever, nor do we want to tour forever. It's just, doesn't lead to a good lifestyle for many reasons. But
he kind of taught you the art of tour managing too, or
tour accounting. I had
I
already been a pretty good road manager and tour manager, but the time I got to the chance in 94 to learn tour accounting from Stuart Ross, that was the final tool in my Leatherman of business acumen that I needed to have. I could load a truck like a motherfucker. I could get a band from point A to point B spinning on the head of a needle. You learn. The best way to learn is to have shitty. I'll be honest with you, Bill. In the music business, the best way to learn how to be a great road manager is to experience shitty situations, get out of it, and remember, don't do it again and say, "Oh, that fucker Murphy, aka Murphy's Law, whatever can happen will. That fucker's right around the corner everywhere." And I got to be looking out for him all the time, and I got to be able to one up that son of a bitch.
Now, I heard on one of your interviews that I was listening to too, you shared stories similar, like, getting into bad situations on the road, but knowing, ahead of time through those bad experiences, like when you're in certain towns, like I guess some of the crew the bands got sick, and you knew a doctor to call, and you brought them in. You knew like where all the
rock docs are. Anytime you're in a city and you needed a rock doc, back before we had these things, you used to have to carry a book, and I don't have any of my old books with me, but you would carry these, and then these books got really fancy, and they were called filofaxes, which was a small 3-ring binder, and you keep everything organized in this filofax. So you had your daily planner in there, you had your sometimes you'd have your tour itinerary shrunken down to be the same size so it fits in your filofax. In your filofax, you've got a pocket for receipts, you got a pocket for the business cards you're collecting, you've got an address book, and then you're breaking down your address book through by cities. And each city, you're like, I got the rock doc. I got the A1 runner. I got the pot guy. I got the blow guy. You know, I mean, you know, you've got a database of great drivers, truck drivers, a great and a database of vendors. And whenever you came across it, even if it was international, if you came across a source and you came across somebody who was just like, just blew your mind, you're like, I want your number.
Yeah.
And that's how I got my first road gig in the spring of 1988. I was working down at Peabody's Down Under in the flats, humping gear, busting ass. It was an alternative band. It came through town called Underworld. Their A&R guy was on the road with them because it was a promo tour. And this guy's like watching me, and this guy come in. He's like watching us hustle all his gear and helping the crew and the band set up. It was a sold-out radio station sponsored show. And it was just a great night for everybody. We loaded everything back out. And he was just like, you never stop moving. And I go, that's just what I do all the time. He goes, do you have a card? And of course, Weasel had cards made for, all of his top guys. That was another why where Weasel was great. He goes, you should always be carrying a business card, with the company name and address and your phone number on there, So I gave him a card. And Weasel calls me one day and he goes, hey, the guy Charlie Prevo, that show you worked a couple weeks ago, he wants to talk to you about a job. And he's like, I'm so happy for you. But he goes, don't be gone too long, So Charlie calls me up. We have this talk. He says, hey, I want to send you out on tour with this band. I need a guy to do backline and drive. And I'm like, okay, sure. Okay. I can drive like a motherfucker, and I can do backline. So I went out for 3 months with a band from England. I drove them all over the country. And I did backline, and that was my first gig. There were 2 guys in that band that were music industry legends. Paul Cook, the drummer from the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
Matthew Ashman, who is the lead singer for this band that I work for, was also the lead guitar player in that alternative band from the 80s called Bow Wow Wow. Matthew is the guy with the beautiful mohawk and that big, beautiful Gretsch White Falcon guitar. But and Matthew actually, I think, was one of the chief songwriters of Bow Wow Wow. But anyway, so I had been a fan, of course, of the Sex Pistols. Who the fuck wasn't if you're a punk
exactly.
kid? And of course, I loved Bow Wow Wow. So I'm sitting there going, holy fucking shit, I'm getting paid to hang out and work with Matthew Ashman and Paul Cook. No fucking way. and all the famous people that we met in New York because they knew those 2 guys. And then we ended the tour in Los Angeles. No, actually, no. Second last tour was in Los Angeles. Second last day of that tour was in LA. The last tour was in San Francisco. So I'm seeing all of these famous musicians in LA and then a couple more in San Francisco because some were living in Frisco. And I'm just going, fuck me, man. I'm getting paid for this. Then I drove the band to the airport, put them, dropped them all off. And then all of a sudden, out of the terminal comes Paul. He comes walking back up to the van, and I go, what's up, mate? And he goes, oi, Marco, what are you doing now? I said, I'm driving back to LA. He goes, he looks in the terminal. He looks at me and goes, I'm coming with you. So he had decided at the last minute that he was not going to go home to the UK, that he was going to go visit his mate in Los Angeles.
Nice.
So we took a day and a half driving down the Pacific Coast Highway, just him and I, having a blast, and it at that point in time, it was no longer fanboy. It was just 2 knuckleheads that had spent a summer together going back to LA. Get back to LA. He helps me return the rental gear. He helps me return the trailer. He helps me drop the van off. We go to the local airport, or we're dropping off the van, and I think it was Budget Rent-A-Car or something silly like that. And we're at the local airport, and we're in the rental car agency, and in walks this guy, and he sits down next to us, and he's on one side, Paul's on the other side. And I look over and I go, holy fuck. I lean over to Paul. I go, hey, Paul, that's Mickey Dolenz. Mickey, he goes, oh, I said, Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees. He looks over and goes, oh, are you Mickey Dolenz? And I said, yeah. He goes, all right then. And Mickey leans over and goes, oh, yeah, he goes, cool, man. Who are you? And I go, that's Paul Cook from the Sex Pistols. And Mickey Dolenz is like, no way. So those two guys are sitting there bullshitting for 10 minutes, and I'm just sitting in the middle kind of going, wow.
Am I really here?
So now, Paul goes, he looks out the window and he goes, oh, my mate's here. And Mickey goes, hey, man, cool. My car's going to be here in a minute. It was great to meet you guys. Nice to talk to you, cats. And, so we leave, we walk outside, and he goes, so what are you going to do now, Marco? I said, I'm just going to catch a cab up to LAX and spend the night there, and then I'll just fly out the next morning. He goes, the fuck you are? Get in the car. I go, what? He goes, you're going to spend the night at my mate's house, and he'll take you to the airport the next day. I'm like, okay. So I get in the car. I'm in the back seat. I'm still not paying attention, Bill. Still not paying attention. All of a sudden, I look in the rearview mirror, and I recognize the guy driving the car. Steve Jones, the guitar player from the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
So we went back to Steve Jones's house, hung out for the day, went out for dinner. I crashed on Steve Jones's couch. They drove me to the airport the next morning. Actually, yeah. Steve's girlfriend drove me to the airport the next day. And that was in 1988.
Wow.
And in 1996, I'm tour managing Gravity Kills. We were chosen as one of the support acts to do the entire tour. So we were the direct support, middle band. And the opening band was broken up to half the tour was Goldfinger, half the tour was Stabbing Westward. So we arrive at the first show. I think it was in Seattle. And I walk out on stage. I walk up on stage to talk to the stage manager. I think his name was Dennis. It's amazing I can still remember all this stuff. I walk up on stage and I was looking for Dennis. I'm looking around, and all of a sudden there's, the Pistols are sound checking, and Paul Cook looks over and he goes, puts his sticks down on the stair. He goes, oi, Marco, what the fuck are you doing here? I was like, and the two guys from Gravity Kills are right behind me, and I look over at them and I go, that's my friend Paul. And they're just looking at me going, just blown away. So I walk over to him and I go, I'm tour managing the opening act. He goes, oh, fucking great. This is fucking great. This is awesome. It's good to see you. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, this guy hasn't seen me in 8 years. And he recognized me.
Yeah.
I was flattered.
And not just that, it's probably, like they say, it's like people not just remember, I mean, sometimes I forget names and, quite too often that I like to admit, but when people make you feel a certain way being around them, you're prone to remember them more. So obviously you guys had that great bond, man. That
we did. And then
forget you.
And then Steve Jones comes waddling over and he's playing guitar. And he goes, oh, Paul, isn't that your mate? And
you stay on my couch?
Yeah, he goes, that's Marco. And I go, hey, Steve, how are you? Good to see you again. He goes, yeah. I said, saw you in 88. And I said, and then I saw you in 92 when you were, and Steve had this project band for a while there that did okay on alternative rock radio. I think it was called the Atomic Playboys or something. And Steve was a guitar player, and they played a show at Music Hall, and I was the runner. And Steve was coming downstairs as I'm leaving to go run an errand. He goes, hey, same thing he said to me. Aren't you Paul's mate? And I said, yeah. I'm Marco. I was his backline guy. He goes, are you working with one of the bands here today? I said, no, I'm working for the local promoter. He's like, cool. So we saw each other 2 times that day. And then I said to Steve when I saw him in 96, I go, yeah, I also saw you in 92 at Music Hall. He goes, oh, yeah, with that crap band I played with, So anyway, was just bizarre. It was just bizarre. So, you know, you come across all these little things and you realize you're getting paid for it and you've worked hard and you know what you're doing and you carry yourself, and gratitude and grateful and
Yeah.
that whole 9 yards, man.
Power of gratitude, the power of, networking and hustle.
Yes.
I mean, the hard work and hustle was what caught so many people's eye at first to bring you in, but then, how you make them feel, how grateful you are for the opportunity. And, I wanted to ask you too, because, you've worked with quite a few bands, and, I heard you in one interview talking about, I think it was maybe one of your like classes, which I want to get into a little bit as well. But you were talking about some bands that you've worked with that are weekend warriors, but then when it comes to that, taking it to the next level, they either like flake out, they get scared or self-destruct or whatever, or panic. And then there's, the ones that go for it and they take that leap of faith when it comes to like record deals. And
it's true. It's true. There were, and sadly, it seemed that there were too many bands that I was actually personally involved with. He's either in two particular bands from the Cleveland scene as their manager, and they just got to the point where things got difficult and they gave up. Actually, 3 bands from Northeastern Ohio. And it's funny that after the first one had basically imploded, after they fired me as their manager, I didn't honestly imploded. I think they just disbanded. I said to them right before I got fired, I go, you know what I've just figured out? And they said, what's that? I said, we're going to be really close to a good thing when you guys don't want to write music together anymore. You don't want to rehearse anymore, and you can't stand to be around each other. And I said, when you reach that point, have you ever seen, do you remember the TV show Kung Fu?
Yeah. David
Remember
Carradine.
the point where, remember that he would go, when you can snatch the pebble from my hand.
Yeah.
That is when you are free. And that was the snatch the pebble from my hand moment, where I said to these guys, I said, you're going to know that you're close when everything sucks. And I said, that is when you basically got to go. You got to dig deep, and you just got to triple and quadruple your efforts.
Well, it's like that cartoon where you see the guy digging the hole underground, and just like right on the, like one more smack away on the pick, and there's like a treasure. And then he just gets too tired and gives up because it was too much work. And
right.
But he just pushed through. There it was,
Finish it. That's what I used to try and tell these guys. So that was these weekend warriors. They would just get to this point and they would just be like, give up. And I was just like, oh, good Lord. Really?
And it's like, kind of like how our outside influences can still, like when I had the UPS thing, oh, you got a good thing, stay there, do that, but you either you listen to what your soul's calling you to do, or, you just go through the motions like so many, because it's a comfortable thing. And usually when we get out of our comfort zone, that's when the magic starts happening.
Absolutely. When I'm out of my comfort zone, I'm kind of like, I'm like trying to suck everything in. I used to remind some of my students from my concert tour management class I taught for many years at Tri-C. I was just like, you ever seen this movie called Short Circuit, where there's this like homemade computer and he turns into like
Johnny Five.
Right, Johnny Five. And I said, and the only thing he always constantly wanted was input, input. And that's when I was starting out and starting to get into this, as things got exciting, I was just like, input, need more input. So I would sit down and I'd talk to these production managers or tour managers that I was working for at Coliseum shows or theater shows or wherever, or, shooting the shit with a stage manager or a backline guy at, Peabody's Down Under show back in the day, or a fantasy theater show back in the day, over a meal, like, so how did you get your start? Where did you come from? Tell me your story. And, most of these guys would tell your story and you're kind of like, okay, noted, or if they had a problematic situation that night at the show, like something happened, you would be like, oh, that's how he solved that problem, or that's how she solved that problem. I would always remember that stuff. And so that when I was put into a situation, guys were like, how in the fuck did you get us out of that jam?
Input.
Yeah. Or just, again, going back to what I said earlier, just being that tinkerer, kind of going, okay, this looks kind of broken. It's rattling over there, and let's go over there and take a look over there, and not being afraid to jump in and fix something, and going back to the mantra of my high school: be a man for others. Just be a man for others. And that's what, again, that's what my son's in the other room doing his homework now, because he just wants to get good grades. That's what I keep telling him. Just be a man for others. Just it will help you out immensely. Be kind, be generous, and be educated.
Now you've we've touched on him a little bit, but I wanted to get in a little bit more with your relationship with Nine Inch Nails and when you started working with.
Well, I officially started working with Trent in well, his manager at the time and for many years was this gentleman from Cleveland named John Malm. John Malm I had met through Michelle DeFrasia at the Fantasy. Michelle and John were dating for many years. John would promote shows here and there. So as a stage manager or a stagehand, I would interface with John. And one day, John, of course, being the guy that he is, my glasses are acting funny. Being the guy that he is, said, hey, I got this guy, and I managed this group. And at the time, he was also working with a band called from the Cleveland music scene. I think for a minute there, John was working with the Exotic Birds.
Okay.
Of which Trent Reznor was a member of at one point. So the synth pop scene, was very incestuous for a while there. Guys trading band members back and forth, blah, blah, blah. Exotic Birds at one point had Trent Reznor and Frank Vale playing keyboards as Andy Kubaszewski, or Andy K, as we called him, was singing and playing, bass or xylophone. But Andy was a monster percussion player, killer drummer, but he wanted to be the front man. So, the Exotic Birds at one point was Andy and Trent and Frank and another guy playing bass. I can't remember his name. It's escaping me. I'm sorry. And Tom Freer, who played drums. Now, Tom Freer has been with the Cleveland Orchestra. I don't know how long Tom Freer has been with the Cleveland Orchestra. Tom Freer is the guy at the Cleveland Orchestra who goes to dong, 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 dong. Just legend.
Yeah.
Legend and, percussionist. So at that time, that band, think about how dangerous that band was at one point. And they just couldn't get it together. So Trent, I met him through that scene. I'd been working with him, and then knowing John. And so, John said to me one day, he goes, if I ever need a guy to go out on the road with Trent and the band, would you be interested? I go, of course. You need a guy from Cleveland to go with you. You don't need to hire a guy from New York or LA or Chicago. Hire a guy from fucking Cleveland.
Yeah.
So there we go. So, they came home after doing the Skinny Puppy show where they were driving in their cars, which was a nightmare for them. And then that was the true tale of, okay, we're not going to go out and do any more shows unless we go out in a van and we take a crew guy, a sound guy and a crew guy. So it was Sean, Bevan, and me at first. It was just two of us. It's the two of us in the band. Then it turned into Sean and I and a lighting guy, Bob Henning, and myself. It was Sean, Bob Henning, and myself. So 3 crew and 4 band. And then it just, each time it got bigger, more people came into the fold.
But you got to be a part of it as it like went from kind of like local regional.
Oh yeah,
blew up.
But we knew what we were doing. I mean, Trent had the skills musically and business wise. Sean Bevan was an amazing sound engineer, and Sean Bevan was a talented musician himself, Bill. Sean was a bass player and a singer. It got to the point where Sean was called the singing sound man, because there'd be Richard and Trent singing up on stage and James Williams up on stage, and Sean would be doing, there'd be a Trent, Rich, there'd be 3 guys singing on stage and a 4th at front of house with a microphone, and that's how the vocals sounded so powerful. Had like, oh. So anyway, that's.
So I remember, I became a huge fan, but a lot of people were like, "Man, I can't believe you never seen him at the Fantasy when they were starting and this and that." And I think it was like I was still in high school when they were taking off and playing the Fantasy, so it's like I couldn't.
Well, it's funny people say the Fantasy.
I couldn't make it out there.
It's funny people say the Fantasy, and here's the true legacy of that. Fantasy shows, as far as I know, with 9 Inch Nails, there may have been one with Skinny Puppy.
Okay.
That's one. Then there was one December 28th, 1989. Then there was the Fantasy. So that was 89. Then we did Summer of 90, and the tour went crazy. Then there was one in December of 90. And we never played Cleveland again until Lollapalooza, summer of 91. And then there was, no, take it back, rewind. Summer of 90, Empire nightclub. Winter, December of 90, Fantasy Theater sold out.
Wow.
Summer of 91, we played Lollapalooza, and then did not play Cleveland again until 94.
Yeah, see, I ended up,
so there wasn't a lot of shows in Cleveland. There really wasn't a lot of shows. People keep thinking we would play, 9 Inch Nails wants to play there all the time. It's not true.
No.
We rehearsed in Cleveland, for sure. Definitely.
I remember
till he moved to New Orleans, and then all rehearsals were in New Orleans. So
okay. Yeah, I remember I graduated in 91 from North Olmsted.
Mm-hmm.
And then just kind of started going to shows around then, because we had some friends that played in bands at Flashes and stuff like that. Yeah. And then I went away for the Navy. So when I was away, Downward Spiral was coming out. And then that's when they were like
94.
Yeah, that's when they really blew up and took off.
We played in Cleveland. In 94, we played the Agora Theater on our way to the East Coast to fly to Europe. We played, I'm going to guess it was either May or April of 94. And then did not play Cleveland again until the fall of 94. Then the winter of 94. No, summer of 94. Oh, spring of 94 at the Agora. Summer of 94 at Nautica. Winter of 94 at CSU. And then again, one more show at CSU.
I think I was at that Nautica one. Was that the one with Hole and Marilyn Manson?
Yeah, sure was.
Harbor Inn.
Oh my God.
Craziness I heard about.
No.
Yeah, I just came home, I think, around then off of active duty.
Mm-hmm.
And got to go to that. And then, then I was at the Blossom shows with Bowie and stuff like that. And I think that was one of the
one show with David in 95. Mm-hmm. It was
And
October 95.
but you know, huge fan, just wasn't able to make a lot of those earlier shows, and I'm kicking myself for not going to that awesome one that they had at Blossom.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. That was pretty magical, as I keep telling everybody. What was it like? I'll just go, well, it was, for me, it was magical.
Yeah,
absolutely magical.
Well, yeah, and I know there's more like personal reasons for that for you, because like you had that relationship with them, and then it kind of like you didn't for a little bit. Now the relationship is, saying a pretty solid right now. I think you were sharing with me. What was the what was your relationship like over the years with Trent and them?
Well, when Richard and I always were able to stay in touch, most of the time through the internet. When I was managing Disengage, we were playing a show in Detroit one night. No, we were in Detroit one night recording a record or something, and Filter was playing, and I reached out to Filter's management and said, hey, I'd like to come by and say hi to Richard. And Richard was in a good space at that point in time. And we went backstage, and I think I blew those guys' mind, Disengage's mind. They're like, wow, Filter? I go, yeah, of course. No Filter. Richard and I got in trouble many times together. Anyway, so Richard and I always were able to stay in touch. Then when Facebook started to start, I'd reach out to Charlie here and there, just hi and hello. And I knew his wife, Judy, really well. So she's a famous photographer. So I'd, comment on her pictures, and Charlie would say, hey, Sparkles, how you doing? And then Chris Frenna and I started to get back in touch, and then we actually started to talk on the phone sometimes, because Chris was, in his tough time. And then Chris had reached out to me to help him as he was trying to get an associate's professorship. So I wrote him a really great letter of recommendation that was true and honest and from my heart. And we've been in touch ever since. And the fun part about getting together, and then I had been contacted by someone from Trent's camp about the original induction ceremony. Like, hey, we want you to sit at the table. We want you to be a part of this. And I was like, what? I thought it was somebody busting my balls. So I was like, oh, yeah, sure, great. Keep me in the loop. And then, of course, COVID came. That got delayed. Then they were coming back to do the shows in September of 21 at Nautica. Again, he reaches out, hey, Marco, it's me. Yeah, it's me, Trent. Still wondering if, when I come to town to do the shows at Nautica, if you'd like to come and be a part of it. We're going to do some fun stuff. Want to hang out and catch up? Sure. Absolutely. Sure. No problem. Then he sent me another email saying, guess I won't see you this year. So then I reached out in like June or May and said, hey, if your offer still stands, hang on. If your offer still stands, I would like to, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. If your offer still stands, I'd like to come and hang out with you guys when you're in town for the ministry show. And he said, absolutely. He goes, we're planning a private dinner on Friday and a visit to the Rock Hall. We want you to be a part of that. Come hang out with us. So I arrived at, the hotel early on Friday, according to the meeting plans that I kept getting from their security guy and their tour manager, Jerome. And the first guy that came down to the lobby at the hotel was Chris. and we sat downstairs and talked for like 20 minutes. And then Charlie came down with Judy, and then Robin came down, and then Jerome came down, the security guys came down, and then we all piled in a big, one of those big vans, those giant vans, like an airport van, and limo, whatever you want to call them, party limo, party bus. And then we went down to the Rock Hall, and then Trent came down to the Rock Hall, and he walks in, he looks over, and he goes, "Hey, what's up, Sparkles?" So, we're at the Rock Hall, we're walking around, hanging out, and then, at dinner, we go to dinner afterwards, and he sat down and he talked with me. We sat down, we talked for like 20 minutes. It was like a good, solid catch up. Like, how you doing? And, and we talked about, sobriety. We talked about family. We talked about the death of my wife, Erin. We talked about how funny it is that he's got, not only does he have kids, he has kids, and there's 5.
Wow.
And then he said, "Yeah, but I'm still not cool." Because I am not cool with my kids. And I said, "I'm trying to convince my son how cool it would be if he would come to the show with me, and I could get pictures of him taken with the band and Trent, guys in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame." It didn't click in his head. So maybe someday he's going to go, "You know what, Dad, I really wish I would have went to that show with you."
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's all right. It's his prerogative. It's his life.
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't cool enough. So so we finished that evening. What's funny is that Friday night, the whole day, the Rock Hall, the dinner, I was home and on the phone with my friend by 9:45. I was home and in bed by 9:45. And then the next day, met at the hotel again, and then rode out with them on the tour bus and hung out with them all day. Watched early rehearsals. Watched how magical he still is, and trying to keep the entertainment value really high and motivate everybody, like telling Rich, "You're going to walk out there on stage and you're going to be great. You're going to be awesome. And it's going to be cool as fuck. I want you to walk out there like you got the biggest dick in the venue," And they went out there early Saturday morning, Bill, so that Ministry and Night Sareb would have plenty of time during the day. And they went out there early to get the last rehearsal in, because they had been rehearsing in LA to go over the set of music that they did together as collectively as that band. And I know that, because you probably looked, how cool that whole thing was, where Richard came out and sang a Nine Inch Nails song. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, and then they did a Filter song too.
It shows you the humanity of these guys.
Yeah,
and that was the thing that I always felt that people were not understanding. Oh man, he must be like a dick, and he's not cool, and everybody's like, they're like, oh, they must be so full of themselves. I go, no, actually, they're really, really nice guys from Ohio and Pennsylvania, and they're practical jokers, and they're hardworking. And I said, Trent would never ask you to do something that he wouldn't do himself, but he can't do everything, although he would try to do everything. And here we are out there at 10 o'clock in the morning so that he can try and do everything, so they can get the rehearsal done and run through it one more time and make sure everybody knows what they're doing, so that when the lights go down and the show is happening and it's time for the collaborative set, that it fucking kicks ass. And it did. It fucking kicked ass.
Like, I've had the pleasure of meeting Richard a couple times and talking with him, and his brother Robert came out when I was deployed over in the Middle East, and I met him out there. And then I reconnected with him at a Comic-Con in Pittsburgh and showed him our picture together. And he just stood there talking with me for like 20 minutes and was, really cool guys.
They're just guys from Bay Village.
Yeah. And Trent's still on my list someday, but
he's if he wasn't so busy, and I know at one point in his life, he said to me, he goes, I wish like in the summer of '95 when we were down there building the studio out and all that stuff. We were sitting at Igor's one night outside on the patio on St. Charles Street. And he goes, "Man, I miss the van days. I just wish I could go back to the van days." And I looked him dead in the eye, Bill, and I said, "You go back to the van days any day you want. It's just not. It's just not going to be the same." I said,
No.
"We can go out and tour in vans anytime we want." I said, "Why don't we go out under a fake name, like go out and go do shows in clubs as," and I couldn't remember the name. It was like a name of a song, and it said the name of the song, aka Nine Inch Nails cover band. And I said, you could go out and do these things, and all of a sudden people would go, "Oh my fucking God, it's really him."
Go out as Reptile, and then you
Yeah.
can actually be the hepatologist on that.
Right. Right. Oh my God.
So it
So
brings
many
it all
comedians, so many comedians out of work, and you're cracking jokes. So no, it's just I remember him saying, "I wish I could go back to the old days." And I said, "You know what?"
Now, I wanted to ask, during that time when you were working with him, were you with him when he had bought the old Sharon Tate house?
They didn't buy it, they rented it, and
Or
they
rented
didn't.
it or whatever?
No, I wasn't. It was during time off, because when they had time off, I would go out and work with other bands.
Okay. I was
Um,
just curious about it. I'd love to hear some stories about that place, Mike.
no, what I can tell you is that when they rented it, they didn't know anything about it.
No.
No,
All right.
no, it didn't click when they went to go to view the space, for a space to set up a studio, and guys are going to live there and they're going to record there and blah 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 and blah blah blah. It didn't click until somebody actually came over and said,
Bro.
"Bro, do you know the history of this place?" So of course it was just like the creep factor was like, "Yes,"
Yeah.
And I got to go out there and spend a day and a half when I was out there touring with another band. And I just, I called up John. I called up the house, because back in those days I could call up the house. I said, "Hey, it's Marco. I'm in town." "Hey, Sparkles, what's going on?" I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm here with I'm dropping off my van and I'm hopping on a plane to go home." This particular band, I just got done tour managing a band and went over to Europe for 2 weeks, and then they were going to start another Western tour, and they were going to use my van, because I used to rent my van out to bands. I had a really nice 15-passenger van. And he's like, "Cool, come on up and visit." So I went up and they gave me the tour. They were still working on the record. It wasn't done, and he goes, "Hey man, I'm going to get back to work." And I said, "Hey, you got a hose?" And he's like, "Yeah." I go, "I'm going to wash the van down." So I'm in the driveway, I'm washing the van down. I'm talking to the other guys in the band. I'm getting to know, and it's just, I got to talk to Flood, the famous producer. He was there. And Trent came out and helped me finish drying off the van, and we're shooting the shit. And I think that night maybe we may have gone out for pizza or something that night. And then I went and I said I drove my van and parked it somewhere, and the next day the band was going to pick it up. And that was it. And then I was the guy. I was the guy that drove Richard Patrick and Brian Lee's gang out to Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
In
From
my
here?
in my van, I went to U-Haul on 65th and Denison, picked up a car trailer, those two-wheel car trailers. And we went out to Richard's house on Bates Drive in Bay Village, and he had silver, little tiny little Volkswagen, not a Volkswagen, silver wagon. I don't remember, it was like a Ford Cougar or something like that. But it was a little wagon, and we put it up on the driver on the two-wheel, and then packed it full of shit, and then put some of it in the van, and then we drove to Chicago. We picked up Lee's gang, packed him up in the van, drove and started heading west. And then in Denver, we dropped the car down, and the space that their bodies took in the van, we took everything out of the car and put it into the van. And then I said to those two knuckleheads, I showed them on the map, I said, in 2 days' time, you meet me here at this location. And they met me there. And then we put the van back up on the two-wheel dolly, reloaded it, and made space for him again in the van. And then went to a bar in Denver that night, and they made a connection, bought mushrooms. And then the next day, we drove to the south rim of the Grand Canyon. I think the south rim is got the better views. The south rim of the Grand Canyon, and they were shrooming their fucking balls off. I got pictures of it. I'm sorry, Richard. If your mom finds out about this, I apologize. But, I think he's actually told that story anyway. He and Richard were.
Yeah.
My dad, he and Brian were. That's where the Filter
got some inspiration from there.
They got some inspiration from it, but Filter was already a band in Richard's head, and he had already been working on some Filter songs with two other guys locally. But that's another story for another day. But nice. I was and then we put the car back up on the two-wheel dolly, and then I drove them out to Los Angeles. I took Richard actually, ironically, directly to his brother's house. I dropped him off at his brother's house. And then I took Brian up to the Tate house. So the second time I'd gone to the Tate house, I knew exactly where I was going.
Now, how well did you get to know Robert?
Only through Richard. Only through Richard. I got to meet Robert and his wife, Karen. Very nice people, very good people. I think that if I ran into him today, he may or may not recognize me, but I would say, hey, I'm Marco. He'd probably go, I know that name somewhere. But,
like Steve Jones,
Right. Every time we would be in LA or it'd be around LA, and, when I arrived with him and dropped him off at Robert and Karen's house, he came up and gave me a hug. He goes, thanks for bringing my brother out here and getting him here safely. I knew all that. I knew the whole family really well. His dad, his mom, and his twin sister, Sherry, and his brother, Louie, and Robert, and there's one more, I thought. I'm brain farting on one more.
Now, so you would work, you got to work with, 9 Inch Nails, but what other bands? And you mentioned Gravity Kills and stuff like that.
When I was out with 9 Inch Nails, I ran into and met Jimmy Chamberlain, the drummer from the Smashing Pumpkins.
Okay.
We had a wild night and we hit it off. And then I got home in, I think early September 91. I got a phone call from their manager, Andy Gershon. Hey, we want you to tour manage the Smashing Pumpkins. Okay.
And what time frame was this at with
late 91?
Okay.
And then we went out and we toured with Red Hot Chili Peppers and Pearl Jam. And this was right as 10 was exploding, and it was Blood Sugar Sex Magic tour.
Oh.
And then that was a great tour. That was probably, that could nudge some other tours, probably one of the funnest tours I was ever on. There wasn't a guy on that tour over 35 years old. And it ran like clockwork, and it was great. It was the Chili Peppers top of their game, Smashing Pumpkins blowing up, Pearl Jam blowing up. We're playing small arenas and big, it was just a blast. So a lot of times it went from one to the other to the other. So then I went over to Europe with the Pumpkins. Then we came home for a minute, and then we went to Japan. And then we came home, and then we were home for another minute, and then we went out and did 3 or 4 shows with Guns N' Roses. And then I was done with the Pumpkins because their Gish album campaign was over. They were going to stop and go do the next record, which they did in Atlanta. So then while I'm out tormenting the Pumpkins, our opening act in the UK was a band from England called Catherine Wheel. So Catherine Wheel came to the States. They called me, and I went out and did their entire first record, touring in America and overseas, and then back in America again. Then in 93, and then I took some time off for a little bit, and then I worked with a band from Canada called Pursuit of Happiness. Then I worked with Catherine Wheel again on Chrome, their next record. I'm probably missing somebody. And then I worked with a band called 93, 90, Cop Shoot Cop.
Okay.
Which was a really, really cool, wild band.
I just got the
then I got the call. Then I got the call from Trent's manager John to say, you gotta stop taking work. I'm gonna need you to go to LA. And that was December of 93. And I go, what? How long? And he goes, well, maybe sometime in January. I go, well, I just broke up with Joyce. He was like, what? You broke up with Joyce? It was a girl I've been dating for 5 years. And I go, yeah, it just fell apart. She didn't want to commit. She didn't want to settle down and get married, whatever. We both have different views of the whole breakup. But so I said, I got to pack up my apartment, because if you're going to send me out, I said, how long is this thing going to be, John? He goes, it could be 18 months. I go, well, then I'm packing up my apartment and I'm going to need time. So he says, okay, all right, I need you to, okay. So then he calls me one day in a panic and he goes, there's a problem in LA. We're getting booted out of a rehearsal space. You need to go out there early. I said, when? He goes, I need you on a plane tomorrow. I go, no, I'm going to plane in 2 days. So I packed up what I could. I left a bunch of shit for my sister to deal with and movers. I had a ton of money saved up at the time, so I paid people to move. But anyway, that was January 13th, 1994. I flew out to LA and then packed up the studio. And while we were packing up the studio, there's a studio and the live instruments, because they were all in the same space, because ironically they had gotten kicked out of the Tate House because the Tate House had sold. so anyway, he was having a bad stroke of luck for a while. So then they were in this place called the Rehearsal Complex. In the Rehearsal Complex, they had taken the entire control room, Bill, in the tape machines, the outboard gear, the big giant SSL console, and set it all up in these offices. This back office is off of this big giant soundstage at this place called the Rehearsal Complex. And the band was practicing live with a small monitor system in the giant room, like where they could film a movie scene. And they came in one day, and the studio manager goes, you guys have got to go. Neil Young's coming in tomorrow and next week, and he wants a lockout. And then that's when the relationship between Trent and Jimmy Iovine got a little strange, because Jimmy Iovine had convinced him, don't worry about it. I know this guy who owns this place. You can go there. You can stay there indefinitely. And then it was within weeks, he was told he had to move again, which really disturbed the whole process of getting there. It just delayed the whole process. I think the record would have been out a lot earlier in 94. Yeah. But it wasn't. So so I had to fly out there, and that was January 13th. Got out there about 2 p.m, went out there. We stayed up till about 3 or 4 in the morning. About 3:30 in the morning, went back to the rental house where everybody, it was a flop house, where Robin was sleeping, Sean was sleeping, and Danny was sleeping, and me. And I was on a rollaway bed in the kitchen. a twin rollaway bed in the kitchen.
Nice.
Well, if you know your history, at 5:55 in the a.m. or 4:30 in the morning is when that giant earthquake hit.
Oh, wow.
And I woke up, and my bed was bouncing off the walls.
Where like glasses and all kinds of
It
things
was
could be
fucking
falling on
dude.
you.
You got to remember, I'm a guy from Cleveland. And all the time I had been in LA, I had never even felt
Yeah.
nothing. And I'm literally woke up and it was like a scene out of Poltergeist.
Like somebody put a quarter in your rollaway bed.
No,
no.
Like there was two giants playing hockey with the bed, throwing it back and forth violently as hell as they could. So I jump out of the bed, or get thrown out of the bed, and here's where the divine power comes into play. Something told me, Bill, this is a true story. Go into the doorway, put your back up against one side of the doorway, put your hands up against the other side of the doorway, and then do the same thing with your feet. So that, because the doorway is built solid.
Yeah.
So I'm screaming. I'm in the doorway between the kitchen and the dining room, screaming, fuck, fuck, fuck. I couldn't even hear myself. So it's like all of a sudden, like, fuck, because the rumble went away. And then I said to everybody cool, everybody cool, everybody cool. Everybody's in shock. So I heard back from Danny. I heard from Sean and nothing from Robin. I go in his room. He's not there. And I look outside. Now you got to remember, we lost power. So what happens in a major city when you lose power everywhere? It is pitch black.
Yeah.
Not a light anywhere. Now I had a mag light. I walk back into my room. I find my mag light, because back in those days, everybody had mag light because you were cool. So I go outside. I find Robin. I find Danny, Chris. Then Sean goes, Marco, go down and take your mag light. Go down in the basement, shut the main gas line off. I'm like, okay, cool. Meanwhile, they're filling every sink they can with water. Now, here's the kicker. It's the second part of the divine power that day. I walked through the kitchen 4 or 5 times myself. Guys were going in and out through the kitchen, getting pots to fill up, pots of water. 3 wine bottles had fallen off the refrigerator, shattered all over the floor. Nobody stepped on any glass.
Wow.
Nobody stepped on any glass. How weird is that?
Yeah.
Bizarre. Now remember, it's still pitch black. It was like my guardian angel was like, not on my watch. No fucking way is this guy going to the hospital with a major laceration problem. No fucking way. You dragged him out here. You brought him into this fucking mess. Keep him healthy. So we all pile out of the house. I had a cell phone at the time. We get out to the van. We plug it into the van. We keep the van running. We got lights in the van. And everybody calls their parents one by one. All our parents were back on the East Coast. I call my mom and I go, hey, Mom, you up yet? She goes, no. I go, you're going to turn on the news. You're going to hear that there's a major, major earthquake in California. Obviously, I'm okay. She's like, and she goes, duh. And I go, Mom, you're going to find out it's pretty bad. So just want to let you know you're fine. So, meanwhile, true story. True story. Fucking crazy.
Now, speaking of, I guess this would be a good segue to talk about, speaking of the higher power, kind of what has connected us as friends. Because I've known of you in the music scene. You may have known of me, and I forget how we we're just kind of like mutual friends, Facebook or whatever. But I think it wasn't until, we both started working this program that we're in,
right?
That brought us together and made us, brought us together as friends. This commonality. You want to share a little bit about your recovery journey?
Sure. I touched on it a little bit a while ago. In 1995, I met this. Oh, actually, in 94, I met this. I ran into this person. She was in a band. They played in LA, and I was like, who in God's name is that? So I went over, I talked to her. She blew me off. She wouldn't give me the time of day. Now, so that's 94. So then 95 or so comes around. I ran into the same person. Her name was Sabrina. She was in a band. And she's now living in Detroit. Or she was in Detroit. Yeah, she was living in Detroit. She was no longer living in Los Angeles. I'm sorry. She was from Wisconsin. She was living and she was on tour in LA. We went to go see the band. And Trent was like, not necessarily the kind of band I want to tour with. I think we went there to go check them out as a tour potential. And he was like, no, not my cup of tea. So then I ran into this person at another show. It was at a Manson show. And we hit it off. And she was like, yeah, I remember I blew you off. I was such an asshole to you. It's like blah, blah, blah. So we stayed in touch. And then we dated all of 96. And then I decided to move her to Cleveland and move her in with me. We got a new apartment together and all that stuff. He had a falling out with her band. She decided to go back out on the road with her band. She had my 100% full blessing. I was like, listen, I can tell you really want to do this. Your band is going to be opening for Danzig. This is a good exposure. This is a good way for you to get back in. I said, go for it. Here's a credit card. You're going to need it on the road. Just set up the whole thing. Well, Danzig's tour manager happened to be the tour manager for Marilyn Manson. When Manson was with us, and when I went out to advise him and teach him further tour management skills, I ended up after the Bowie tour going out with Manson for almost 2 months.
Okay. And
big mistake.
I was going to ask what that experience was like.
Oh God, those guys were going to kill me. So I then came home. I decided, so in New Orleans, when we were on the Manson tour, we had come to New Orleans. I still have my car there and a bunch of stuff. And I looked at my car and all my stuff and I go, I'm going home. I'm going home, because they were going into Florida, which was their home territory. And I just knew that it was just going to be absolute chaos. So my liver said, you need to go home. I left the tour. Manson and Twiggy were really bummed, because I was more or less their road manager, because Frankie would deal with everything else and I would take care of Manson and Twiggy, but then teach Frankie settlement and teach him the tricks of what's happening behind your eyes in these clubs, because I'd already been through it. Blah, 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 blah. So I get back and I just fell in love when I moved this girl in with me. I sent her out on tour at Danzig. Frankie calls me and says, Code of the Road, fuck that shit. We used to call ourselves the Distinguished Gentlemen. No, Gentlemen of Note. Frankie and I were the two gentlemen of note. We found this old school sign in a venue one day. It said Gentlemen of Note. And we took this picture of us. So we were always, I said, are you a gentleman? And he says, I'm a gentleman of note. So we had this bonding thing. Well, he calls me up and he says, your girlfriend is on my tour bus sleeping with the guitar player. And I'm not happy with this. I've already talked to Glenn about it. Glenn's not happy about it, but at the end of the day, the guitar player is a big boy. And Glenn said, if you want to call Mark up and tell him. I don't care. Now that tour was going to be in Cleveland in a couple weeks. So I cut her credit card off. I found someone to sublet the apartment. I moved to my mother's house and put all of her stuff in storage and went to her friend, and the only friend she had in Cleveland, and gave her the key for the storage space. She called me up, and she had a calling card too. So I just cut off the credit card and the calling card. And eventually she had to call me up from the venue production office one day. She asked me what's happening. I said, why don't you ask Tommy Victor, and hung up on her. So she knew that I knew. She knew that I knew. So she called me up a couple of days later. She tracked me down at my mom's. I was pretty amazed that she found that number, because the old phone number we had at the apartment was gone. And she said, so is this over? I said, yeah. And I said, your stuff's all in storage. Sarah has your key. Fuck off. I hung up the phone with her. That was the downward spiral beginning. I wanted to just die. And I remember that movie, Leaving Las Vegas. And I was like, that seemed like pretty much fun. So I was doing hardcore drinking every day. Then I would pass out and I'd wake up, and to beat the hangover, I'd start drinking again, as heavy as I could. I think for like 3 months, I was probably sober an hour a day. And, but meanwhile, I had been drinking pretty heavily the whole, for years. And, but I had gotten to the point where it couldn't stop. Just couldn't stop. And I was actually starting to really enjoy it. And then the high holy day came around, St. Patrick's Day. And I was like, I'm going, and I'm going out big. And I met the gang at 7 o'clock in the morning, started a meeting at 7 o'clock. And I paced myself and I drank all day. And I had a brand new car that was not even a month old. So I left Edison's at 3:30 in the morning, and Sandy Rodkowski, the bartender, said, hey, Marco, where you going? I said, I got to go home now. Fuck. She goes, just do one more shot of Jaeger for the road. So my last shot was a shot of Baron Jaeger. And downed it, slammed it on the bar, walked out the door, and I was driving home. And somewhere along the way, I had to put one hand over one of my eyes because I couldn't focus. I'm driving, and I remember getting off at Hilliard and Rocky River. And, when you're off at Hilliard and Rocky River and you can keep going down Hilliard.
Yeah.
Well, there's this side street off to your right, and it kind of goes back onto Hilliard. Well, there was a police officer sitting over there, and I saw him, and I go, I'm done. Light changed. I drove. He immediately turned the lights on. I put like immediately after, as I went through I didn't go through the lights. The light changed. I immediately pulled over, and he pulled up behind me. Rolls the window down. He goes, have you been drinking tonight? I looked at him dead in the eye, Bill. I said, yep. He goes, do you think you're drunk? And I said, oh, yeah. And he goes, do you think you could get out of the car for me? And I go, I'll try. And, in retrospect, that was what eventually got me driving privileges for work, because I needed to work at the time, because I needed to just make some money. And I had been off tour for a while. And so he goes, do you think you could do a field sobriety test? I said, no, I'm going to fail. And he goes, come on, you at least got to try. And I did the whole thing, and I failed every test, He goes, can you recite the alphabet to me? And I go, I got all the way down. I did. He goes, you cracked a really good joke. I goes, what's that? He goes, you left out L and M in the alphabet. And then you stopped at T, and you looked at me. You turned back, you looked at me, and he goes, see, I left L and M out. And the cop goes, yeah. And I go, you know why I did that? And the police officer looks at me and goes, no. And I go, because they got kicked out for smoking. So at my arraignment, the officer and my brother had a good laugh because they had also reminded me that I pissed my pants during my field sobriety test. I got at my arraignment, and then we had set a date for my sentencing. And at my sentencing, the city of Rocky River had come up with a new option to the 3 days in jail. It was called TIA program. Think about it. TAI. Think about it.
Yeah.
And I go, what's that? It's called Think About It. And so you went in, and there were all these lectures. And the first couple of lectures were people from the program. I was kind of like, yeah. My parents are both. Well, my father, George Hahn, was in the program. My mom was still in it. I think she's got 51 years in now. But yeah, she's old school. Her sponsor is 99. She's got more.
Wow.
Yeah. So second last series. So you had to go in and agree to it and do it. And you have to sign in, sign out, and all that shit, you know. So the second last episode is where they showed a documentary about people who have survived a fatal car crash from a drunk driver. Like I was in the car with my wife died, I survived.
Yeah.
And then the person guilty of killing, the person charged with vehicular homicide. And it's the interview where they talk. And it was like, whoa, heavy. One that went really well, one that did not go really well. Where the one survivor had been lost an arm. And he like pulls his shirt off. He goes, look at me. Look what you did to me. Imagine what my wife looked like. For what? I was like, wow, it's pretty heavy. Started thinking. Mom's in the program. Dad had been in the program. Maybe this is what I need to do. The next week was the last one. And for the second hour, they brought in real people. Real people. Not a movie. It was real people. And it was heavy. So anybody that would have had a soul. And again, there were probably 8 or 10 people in the same boat as I was. But it hit me hard. And that's when I realized I could have killed myself. I could have killed somebody else or several people. And if I would have died, it would have destroyed my mother and my family. Yeah. So that's when I realized how selfish of a process it was. It's all about me. It's all about how I wanted to feel, how I wanted to drown my sorrows and everything. And it's just me. Restless, irritable, discontent. Man, poor me. And I just said, nope, I refuse. And that was it. And then going to meetings every week, hearing stories for 8-10 years.
Yeah, hearing our stories and others. Oh,
I'm telling you, man, it's I was like, I'm so glad that the higher power said, you know what, dude, you're right. We got to keep your, and that's the cool thing to me also, is that I haven't been a hardcore direct sponsor for people, but I have a stepbrother, Brian, and I brought him to a meeting and we did the whole thing. And Brian was really good for a long, long time. And then Brian fell off the wagon. And I don't know Brian's my stepbrother, and I lost track of him after my stepdad died, my mom's third husband, Bob. And I don't even know if I think Brian's still around, but I know Brian's still drinking. And he will die a horrible, painful death. And Brian probably weighs all of 98 pounds, and his kids don't talk to him. His ex-wife won't talk to him. He doesn't see his grandchildren. And, but anyway.
Yeah. And how much time you got now?
25.
25.
Well, at 90, March 18th, 97 was my last drink.
Nice.
So March 18th, 2024 would be 26 years, 25 years. I'm not sure. Yeah, 25.
But, it gets me thinking too, because I see how much my life has changed the longer I've been in. I mean, I've just celebrated 13, how my relationships have changed, especially, with my daughters and everything like that. But, you did a lot of kick-ass stuff in the music industry prior. How much would you say a lot of things have changed and even gotten better now that you've been doing all this continued with sobriety?
I think ironically, I did only 3 tours sober. And it was amazing how, even though I'm not going to say I wasn't efficient and I didn't do my job, because a lot of times, Bill, my drinking and my partying was on my time.
Yeah.
My time. Like, loadout is done. Settlement has occurred. The gear is parked back. The gear is back in the trailer. The gear is in the truck. The gear's in trucks. We've left the arena. It's an after show party. I'm gonna get fucking hammered, or we're on the bus. Bus doesn't leave until 4 a.m. I'm getting hammered, and it's taken me also a long time to also realize that part of the reason why I used to drink all the time was obviously sometimes when you're a tour manager, part of the nature of the job is you got to be a dick.
Yeah.
And I didn't like doing that. And it would bother me. And I think that wasn't like, as far as a percentile towards pushing me to drown my sorrows every night, it was probably 12.5%, 13% of the factoring of it, but that took me a long time through reviewing my steps and where I had been and who I was and how I had changed to realize that I was trying to give myself an anesthesia, if you will.
Yeah.
And then part of it also too is that you run so hard all day long and all night long. And then all you want to do is just go to bed for 4 hours. And sometimes not being a drug guy, God bless me, Jesus Christ, I can only imagine. Not being a drug guy, I just would drink myself, get buzzed and fall asleep.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, you get really good at it. You get really good at it. And it's always around.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's always around, man. It's always around. And so I was just like, you know what? So the last 3 tours I did, I was strong enough. And it was still within a year of less than a year being sober. I went out on tour. I made it. I did well. And when I was out on tour with that particular band, the good thing about that was, Actually, no, it's the second band I toured with after my sobriety. The second band I toured with, the number one was drug-free and alcohol-free. Now, the guys in the band and the girls in the band could drink, but they couldn't. You were not allowed to smoke on the bus. She would prefer not to smell pot on you, and there was no alcohol allowed on the bus. So, but it wasn't because that she was in the program. She was just adamant. You know, she had a tattoo on her arm that said drug free. But the other band I worked with was a band from right into my sobriety. It was a band from Iceland. And I'll tell you, those Vikings were fucking crazy drinkers. And I tell you what helped me there was to go, wow, I was that obnoxious.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
I've noticed that since I've been to shows since. Like,
like you just said the other night when you were with your buddies the other night.
Hatebreed, yeah. But so I wanted, because we've been going almost like 2 hours, but I want to bring up to current Mark and what you're doing now with the
Elevation
Group.
Right.
And we were talking a little bit before we went on, things are picking up with that. But how did you get involved with these guys originally, and how this relationship started?
My current job is I am currently employed by a wonderful company located in Sugar Falls, Ohio, called the Elevation Group. And the Elevation Group is a company that is in the music festival business at the moment. But we also do sports marketing for the Mars Corporation, whether it was NASCAR or now it is equestrian and based events. I think the Mars Corporation and or family is moving out of NASCAR and is now going to get into get more deeply involved with the equestrian events, equestrian sports. And we also, we just, do advisory roles for private parties, like, anything entertainment related to a big wig or somebody who needs help with wants entertainment at a private party. We facilitate that. So in 2016, the two companies I had been working for a number of years, a landscape design company and a carpentry business, both decided to shutter their doors at the same time within a couple of weeks of each other. So I was like, okay, higher power, what's next? And several times earlier that year, my boss, Denny Young, had noticed my comments on some of the stuff that he was doing in the entertainment business. Denny was getting back into, it seemed, out of sports market, or adding to the sports marketing portfolio, getting back into concerts and band management and things of that nature. So they became involved with the Goodyear Theater in Akron, Ohio. So they were going to basically manage and book the facility. So they hired two people to be there on a day-to-day basis and a show-to-show basis, which was Ben Barr and myself. Ben being hired eventually to be the GM and myself being hired to be production manager. So having had my background skills, I now work as the production manager for the Elevation Group. And at the moment, a large portion of our responsibility is being production manager for music festivals, of which last year we had 4 major ones and 2 smaller events and a couple of private parties, and then some equestrian events that I do production related things for as well. Next year, we're going to be adding at least 2 to 3 more major events. So I'm not going to get any less busy. rolling into year 60 next year, I'm going to be working at a much higher and faster pace than I did this year. But that's okay. I'm good. I'm in a good space mentally. I'm in a good space physically. I'm in a great space spiritually. And I couldn't be happier. I say I'm the luckiest guy I know. I am the luckiest guy I know. And every day I wake up, I'm like going, woo, can't wait to get to work. Just can't wait to get to work.
I got the impression that it's like a family environment that you're working with.
Absolutely.
I had the pleasure of meeting some of them, at Aaron's memorial, and the way they were there supporting you, like you're a family member,
Oh yeah.
And I thought that I was.
Here's the other thing too. You're right. As my boss Steve Lindecki said to me once, he said, "It's easy to find people that are excellent in their field, whether we're looking to hire a new person. The problem is finding that person who's excellent in their field that fits in with us, because we're quirky and we're weird and we're funny." But I've also found out, and I've come to realize, that all of us who work at the Elevation Group, and even including the Charlotte office, are all huge music fans. And telling you, that really helps. And it helps with the motivation. It helps with the love of the long days. It helps with the giggles and the laughs and the shits and all the other things that come and go with those long, stressful days for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks on end. It's what keeps you motivated. It's what keeps you going. And I'm sure that when you were serving our country and you guys were in shitty situations and long days, I'm sure you found the motivation to serve your country and to be with your comrades far outweighed the dangers of the job,
I was just thinking about that as you were sharing that, because it was just like, sometimes we would, and unfortunately, I guess we picked up a little bit of dark humor during that time, but it was the making each other laugh through the suck, that helps get you through, to keep, carrying you through.
Yep. So we're all fans. We love each other very much. And I know that, that's what also motivates our bosses is they know that if they propose an idea or a challenge to us, we're going to be like, get it out of the way. Here we go. Come on.
Yeah.
So I cannot imagine doing anything else at the moment. I mean, I was happy when I was working in the trades. I know that's where my creativity is. Like I say, I can't carry a tune in a bucket, but man, I studied under two very talented people in the trades, and still to this day, I'm very grateful for the things that I can do in my house, on my house, for my house, and things I can do outside my house, whether it's yard work or planting and pruning or anything, just design and creating living spaces outside as well as taking care of your living space inside. It's just like, I love it. I love tools. I love working with things. I love working with my hands.
But as we were talking earlier, about, where your calling is, and it seemed like your higher power shut that door to bring you back to where your
absolutely
calling is with music.
Absolutely. And that's okay, because I gave up when both of those companies in early 2016 closed for different reasons. I literally looked up at the sky again and said, okay, what's next? Where are we going? What's next? I surrendered. I surrendered. I said, where are we going? What's going on?
We're bringing you back to your first love.
Right. And then Denny called me and said, hey, come down what are you doing? Come on down to Akron. And I went down to Akron and they gave me the tour and they showed me around and they said, hey, we need some help with a couple of shows. I worked 3 shows. I went in the office, which at that point in time was 2 folding chairs and a card table. And gave them my receipts, and Steve wrote me a check for my day rate, my services, and he goes, "Hey, can you do me one more favor?" And he hands me this manila folder, and I open it up and read it. It's a formal job proposal with all kinds of great things, and I just go, sign it. I give it back to him, and he goes, "Cool, you start tomorrow." I go, "No, I started 3 weeks ago when you hired me to do all this work." And he goes, "Ha ha ha!" And he walked out of the room just laughing his ass off. So that was probably around April 29th or May 1st, 2016, and I've been working with them since.
Awesome. And like the two of the biggest ones that you're a part of is Wonderstruck and Wonder Bus.
That's correct.
They're the major two or whatever.
That's correct. And Wonderstruck used to be called Laurel Live in the Cleveland area, and then we changed it to Wonderstruck. And then Wonder Bus evolved in Columbus, was very successful. And then we did Wonder Road in Indianapolis last year, where we have a wonderful, amazing team and a partnership in Indianapolis with two guys named Dan and Josh. Another independent promoter that we've teamed up with in Indianapolis, and it's just and so this year there will be an event in Pittsburgh. It'll be in May. We were in Pittsburgh this past May, but it was a different name. We're going to change the name. So we'll be in Pittsburgh in May.
Now, when it was Laurel Live, was it still Elevation Group doing
yes.
that?
Yes. Okay. Yes. That's who hired me. That's who I've worked for. So.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But everything's been going good, and it's expanding, and
it's nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah.
It's awesome. What they call building a brand.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. And I'm having a blast doing it, and I'm motivated every day. And yeah. There are some days where you wake up and you go, it's 7:30 and you're driving to work and you're like, well, if I was still doing landscape design, I'd be an hour into my day already because we started at 7, and chances are I'd be outside working in the cold and the rain.
Yeah.
At 59 years old, and I probably wouldn't be happy about it,
but it's like, they say if you do what you love, it's not really work. So
yeah, do what you love, and what you love and what you do will love you.
Yeah.
That's another one of my new favorite lines. Do what you love, and what you do will love you. It's so true.
True. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, hey, Mark, we've been going a little over 2 hours. I know you gave me, you said I could have one. I got 2 out of you, and I appreciate the time, man. Because
no problem.
I know we could go a couple more with some of the stories and stuff. But before I let you go, you mind if I ask you a few of the questions I normally ask guests that are on?
No, not at all, brother. Open book. I told you a text message the other day.
Yeah. This is going to be tough. It is tough for all the music fans I ask, but who would you say could you narrow down as your top 3 musical artists?
Oh, I can easily nail that down. I saw one of them last week. One of my favorite bands of all time is a band from England called the Chameleons. I just really connected with them. Just huge connect. Secondly, the Clash, because of their message and just everything about that band from start to finish, from day one till the day it ended with Joe Strummer's death, it's just without a doubt. The third one, boy, that's tough.
Yeah, that's usually the toughest one.
Yeah, the third one is tough. Band I probably listened to the most would probably be, secondly would be Led Zeppelin. And that would be from my beginning of my story when I was a kid all the way forward. Because I remember having, I remember when Led Zeppelin albums came out, Frankie Gorman and I would listen to them. His parents or my parents would buy. You know, like I said, I still have my original, the first records. I still have my original copies from the 70s, you know, or 60s, 70s,
Nice.
and just, you know, that was it. You know, and Led Zeppelin, even though my tastes changed, and sometimes in the late 70s or early 80s into the mid 80s, when you're a punk or a new wave guy, you couldn't like classic rock. I was like, go fuck yourself. Led Zeppelin rules.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So,
And then you had mentioned earlier that your son's over there doing some homework and stuff right now. What class do you feel should be mandatory before graduating high school today?
Which class?
Yeah.
Shop class.
Bring
A
back shop.
full year of shop class, whether you're male or female. We are losing that art in this country.
Trades. Yep.
We are losing that art. No, and even that, just number one, having the appreciation. I mean, let's say you become an Elon Musk or Jeffrey Bezos. Appreciate who the people are that you work for you, and knowing what it takes to do something. And as my grandfather used to say, you know, who grew up in depression, who taught me all these things of being able to, like, most of the time, a lot of the things that break in your house, you might be surprised that you might be able to fix.
Yeah.
And it's true. And it, you know, sometimes when people come over to my house, the stories I tell them about how I've rescued things and fixed things and built things are just like, and I'm like, what? And they're like, that's amazing. And I go, yeah, it's just because I took it apart and figured out how to fix it, you know, or watched a video nowadays, or, you know,
oh yeah,
God forbid when you're a kid, you read the operator's manual, you know. That's my
daughter
dad
fixed her own car the other day watching a video on YouTube. I was like, that's awesome. You know,
I'm telling you that it's shop class. A year of home ec, if you will.
Yeah.
Or cook, clean, do your laundry.
Yeah.
Take care of a baby.
And then who's 3 people who've inspired you or you can credit for making you the person you are today?
My mom, Linda. Stacy Harper. Who else? We always get stuck on that third one because sometimes it's like a 4-way tie. Probably my freshman reading teacher at St. Ignatius High School, Tom Pasco, who once said to me, "Oh, for crying out loud, read something." You know, he would say it to us. He would say it to us all the time, all year long in freshman reading class. For crying out loud, read something. And then if I would show you over here to the other side of me, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows of books. And those are all the books that I've saved, and I've probably gotten rid of hundreds of books.
Yeah.
You know, read some.
Myself.
I love reading books.
Yeah.
I still read books. Read books. You know.
Definitely.
And now I've become this old. I'm now getting to the point where I'm comfortable reading books on my iPad. I'm cool with that because I'm thinking in the back of my head going, you're still reading, you're reading the book, the artist is getting a royalty, and you know, we're not printing something that's going to go to waste. So my theory is that if the technology's there and you can, but you're still reading, then read, you know. So,
gotcha.
and I feel sad that there's a whole new generation of children that will not be able to grasp the concept of reading a book or just reading a book, even if it's on an iPad, because it's It's all about TikTok. It's all about Instagram.
Yep. Yep.
Get the hell off the phone, man. Jesus.
Live life one moment at a time, you know?
Right.
This question, I haven't asked this one in a while, but I'm feeling it for you because of everything that you've done and what you've contributed. But what would you want your legacy to be when Mark O'Shea is no longer here?
Mark O'Shea was a man for others.
There you go.
A man for others. That's what I strive to do every day. And sometimes it's funny. A very good friend of mine, Elena Waters, who I've known for a long, long time, who actually was a celebrant at my marriage to Aaron, gave me this moment of clarity one day. She said, I had gone through a bad breakup and I wasn't very happy about it. And Lena goes, well, what happened? And I said, I don't know. She's this person. And I explained to her the whole thing. And she said, one of the funniest things this person said to me, with me, she said that I was arrogant. And Elena goes, you arrogant? Are you crazy? And Elena goes, I figured it out. I go, what's that? She goes, she interpreted your enthusiasm to help people, probably her, as being arrogant.
Wow.
And I said to her, that's probably right. Because, I don't think I'm an arrogant person. I get excited if I know something and I want to help somebody. And I'm like, here, let me help you do it. And sometimes people are like, just let me do it. And I'm kind of like, I've gotten better at it. And I tell you, it's in the last 2 years, I've gotten really good at being able to go, I think I can.
Yeah.
And then I wait.
Yeah. Wait for them to ask. Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard. It's very hard.
Especially if they're our own kids,
Yeah. Yeah. Let me give you some advice so you don't get in a heartache situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we had to go through it ourselves to learn. So sometimes that's the hardest thing. Sitting back and watching them, let them fall, let them fail.
I like Trent Reznor. Like Trent Reznor said, yeah, I'm, for some of my kids, I'm still not cool enough. I'm like, wow. I know how you feel.
And then any message that you have for our military members currently serving overseas?
Thank you for your service. Thank you for protecting us. Thank you for making that decision to be in the career path that you're in right now. I am grateful. Most people should be grateful. Some aren't, but you're never going to change that situation. Those who aren't, just let it go. Yeah. Let go, and let God.
Yeah.
That's my message. And get home in one piece and get home and let's start the conversation about how we can all help each other post your service. Nice. About what can we do when you get home, and that, be patient with us. We've never been in the same shoes as you guys. It's like, that's why sometimes when to use a very weak, stupid analogy, when people are having problems buying tickets for concerts, and I call them up and I try to give them advice, and they just can't seem to want to listen. And it's like, if you could be in my shoes, you would understand the process. You would understand why things are happening that certain way. And I think we need to start being able to put ourselves in your shoes and figuring out why you've made these decisions you've made and why sometimes you are upset and not happy when you get home. And so be patient with us. You know, we need to learn, but most of the time these problems can be overcome by having these conversations. Have
Amen.
conversations. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Amen. Mark, thank you so much for giving me your time tonight and sharing so much yourself.
You're welcome. You're welcome. No problem.
For being my friend.
My pleasure. Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Yep.
Thank you so much. And before I let you go, one last favor I need from you.
Absolutely.
You mind cutting a promo ID for the show? Just introduce yourself and you're listening to today's Boondoggle.
Sure. Hi, my name is Mark O'Shea. Born in Boston, lived my whole life in the rock and roll capital of Cleveland, Ohio. You're listening to today's Boondoggle podcast.
Mark, awesome, man. Thank you so much, brother.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
You got it.
And I'll be in touch, man.
Okay. All right. So are you so do I just escape here or
Yeah. We just log out or whatever out of studio.
I have no idea. Hold on, let me see here. Oh, there. Exit full screen. All right.